Well, hey everyone, excited to be able to engage this conversation as we're going to take some time and specifically talk about sermon development. How do we work in the normal process of preaching consistently week after week without actually burning ourselves up, but are able to continue to press forward when it comes to areas of creativity and making sure that we land the key point. Now, one of the basic things that we can't forget about in any time when it comes to our weekend service development, and something we've talked about previously in one of the other modules, is just remembering our target audience. Who do we feel best positioned to reach in this community? How has God uniquely gifted you as a speaker, your team, the church, in how you craft the message, but also the entire service experience? You want to flow from beginning to end that really means something. And so let's take some time and let me just kind of briefly walk through some ideas that have helped me over the years, and I hope that they'll help you as well when it comes to that regular rhythm. The first thing you really want to become a student is understanding the flow and the rhythms of your specific community. Every community has a rhythm to how it operates, and what one community in Washington State will operate and the way that they look at the year will be greatly different than, let's say, a community in Florida or a community in Mississippi. And so you really do want to become a student of that. And some of the things that you really want to pay close attention to as you're studying and being a learner of your community is think through, when does school start, when does school end? Most communities operate and think based on the school calendar versus the yearly calendar. And your community may go back to school after Labor Day weekend. Some communities start way before that when it comes to moving forward. I know when we were in Arizona, my kids typically started school at the end of July because they operated off of a modified year-round school kind of process. And so you want to pay close attention to those. They will become natural momentum builders when it comes to how the church operates and how you want to begin to preach. And so think about kind of that moment when people start getting their kids are back in the rhythm of school. They will most likely get back into a rhythm, a regular rhythm with the local churches as well. Now, here's a couple tips that I've found that have proven true both in Arizona and Florida as we've led churches here. And when it came to the fall and getting school back in the rhythm, we did a really big push, but we found that a lot of the people that walked in the doors of our church were people that really had very little, if any, church background. And one of the reasons that they came to church was they felt like maybe church would be the thing that would help their family or help their kids, because maybe their kids got in trouble or their kids are under pressure right away. And so they make the decision to walk in the doors of the church to see if the church may have answers for them with what they're dealing with in the home and the rhythms of getting back into the school rhythm for themselves. Knowing that, we've kind of began to move our sermon series based on knowing that that would be the primary audience of how people are thinking and what they're looking for. And so we began to do series based on child parenting. How do we parent our children well? We did some series on marriage and marriage development. And we found that those became more sticky that time of the year. So pay attention to that. Figure out what are people actually looking for in your community around that time in which school gets back in session. And then the new year is another great moment to be able to seize natural momentum. And I found that a lot of the people that tend to come back to church in January are doing exactly that. They have some background when it comes to church, some type of experience. Maybe it was as a kid, maybe it was as a teenager, and they've hit that magic moment, January 1, where they decided, you know what, maybe we need to give this another shot. Maybe we need to become more serious about our faith, and they begin to explore. And so we begin to cater our conversations, our sermons, our series based on thinking that those were the people that were tending to step back into the room at that point. And so we did things that even if you had a little bit of church experience as a kid, you would probably be familiar with. So like we preached through the story of Jonah. And we found that those things became sticky for us as a church. So you really want to understand the flow, the rhythm of your specific community. Don't push against that when it comes to how you develop your sermons and your sermon series. I'm going to encourage you, pastors, Whether or not you're a youth pastor, whether or not you're the regular senior leader, lead pastor of your church, you really need to plan a minimum of 6 months out in your sermon series development. Really, 1 year would be ideal. And it will really, just that habit, that discipline will relinquish so much pressure on the week to week part of leading the local church, because you've done a lot of hard work and you just kind of follow a script. I load up a Google Doc every year and work based on that, and I can quickly look, and we leave room for, we're going to extend this conversation 1 or 2 weeks, and so I leave those type of moments in there. But it's really helpful for the rest of the team to know what is the rhythm, what's the expectation. So we work hard on, when are we going to do baptisms? When are we going to work in communion? Are we going to do any type of special conversation? Do we need to have a vision conversation? And so that allows us to kind of structure accordingly, and everybody knows what their part, what their expectation is with that. Now, here's one of the things that has been really helpful when it came to how we strategically put that together. We've learned to operate, and we kind of label our series A series, B series, and C series. When we do an A series in the life of our church, that is all hands on deck. That means we're going to be more creative. We're going to create special moment in the service. We're going to go all out when it comes to things like sermon bumpers and even marketing. So we may do mailers. We may do a very heavy social media push to try to really stimulate engagement in those A-level series. Again, not every series can be that. A B-level series is going to be more internal marketing, an internal push. We're not going to go all out when it comes to creativity. There's no set design changes, none of that. It's just we're going to continue moving on. C is very low, and so that's where it's like we're going to just, this is just more of an internal conversation, and so we don't do any new things when it comes to creative. We're not looking at adding different components. We do the minimum when it comes to artwork and sermon bumpers, that type of thing. C series are really good for, those are the moments staff should take vacations, and that's kind of how we put it. A series, everybody's on deck. C series, hey, if you need a rest, those are the most opportune times of the year to do that. So when do we kind of look at A series? Maybe 4 times a year. And so what I found works really well for an A series is kind of that back to school push in the fall, doing something right at that standpoint. December is naturally a high momentum moment in the life of the church if you do it well. And so we usually, after Thanksgiving, do a real special Christmas emphasis, and we go all in on that. And then following that, the new year. And so we usually wait maybe a couple weeks into the new year to really engage that and go heavy. That gives us more time to get our people internally excited about the conversation, gives them time to engage, invite, to invest in their community and their friends and their neighbors, their family members, to bring, invite them to come be a part of what we're doing in our Sunday experience. And then right after Easter, so that where you have a lot of guests that come in, you want some type of hook to try to get them to come back and to experience what church feels like on a regular basis. Some things that you want to think through and you want to plan when it comes to a year calendaring out of your sermon series. 1, vision. You need to articulate the vision of the church on a regular basis. We do 2 spots in our year where we really hit that really hard. One is in the January season, and I actually just take a Sunday and we call it the State of the Church Address. And I just go through everything from the previous year, what we saw, highs and lows, how we experienced God's goodness and grace and blessing in many practical ways. And then the summer, July, we really go after our value vision, and we'll do a multi-week series building momentum towards the fall. And that's really a good moment to be able to ask people, hey, would you get in? Would you be involved? Would you serve? Would you consider joining a small group? Would you consider leading a small group? So those are the times of year. Generosity, you want to make sure, especially in a church plant, that people just don't know the idea of what it means to give on a regular basis to the life of the church, to help the church move forward and be on mission. So you want to make sure that every year you're doing a maybe 3-week series on generosity. I found that for us personally, it works really well to do that in November, helps build momentum towards end of the year giving. And so we connect all those pieces. I'll actually begin to talk about the generosity series a couple weeks before, say in October. We'll go through the series, and then I'll follow it up and ask people, hey, would you consider thinking about our church when it comes to end of year giving, and just having that regular rhythm of reminding your people, but teaching new people what it means to be generous and live generously. And again, that's not just when it comes to our finances, but that's our gifts, it's our talents as well. And so finding opportune moments to talk about that are important. You want to have a time of the year where you really hammer basics of discipleship. What does it mean to practically, on a day-to-day standpoint of following Jesus? Talk about biblical community, the core values of the church. Those are things that you just want to make sure you fit in sometime within the year, every single year. Continue to drip those things into your people. You want to plan out your vacations around your big weekends, meaning don't plan to take Easter weekend off, especially if you're the lead communicator. Find those seasons and those weekends where you just know, hey, it's not going to hurt us if I miss. This is the time of the year that makes sense. So I even look at like Labor Day weekend, some of those type of weekends of, hey, we know attendance is going to be down. That's a good time for me to take a break and get some rest. You want to really pay attention to find and ride the wave of momentum. I've said it before, momentum's a lot like an elephant. You want to do everything you can to keep the elephant from sitting down, because once the elephant sits down, it's really, really hard to get the elephant up and moving again. And so, for instance, a way in which to think about that, Easter is a natural momentum building weekend. People just come to church on Easter weekend. People with little church experience and even no church experience tend to walk in the doors of an Easter weekend experience. And so knowing that, you don't need to start a new series on Easter weekend. Just preach the fact that Jesus rose from the dead and what that means for us, and what that means for all of humanity, and the joy that can bring us. That, death has been conquered, our sin has been conquered when we place our faith in Jesus. Focus on that as the conversation. Start the series the next week. So the idea is maybe we can get a double bump. You'll have a bump in attendance on Easter weekend. What would it look like for us to get another bump following Easter the following week? And a great way to think about that is as well, maybe invite a personality to come and you interview the personality. I've had several professional sports players. I've had high-profile people from our community come, and I just do an interview. And why you want to do an interview is you want your people that come on a Sunday experience to connect with you, because that guest won't be back the following week. And so don't just give them the free mic and allow them to do whatever they do. You want to help people get endeared to you because you're the consistent communicator. And so the interview process will allow you to do that. Plus, it gives you a little bit of control to make sure you steer that weekend experience in the direction that you really hope to land the message as well. And I've just found that those weekends are great. You can have an Easter weekend, say, hey, by the way, we've got so-and-so from, the Arizona Cardinals or the Tampa Bay Rays that are going to be coming in next week. That in itself will draw people to come back and experience what they have to hear. People love to be on, and so leverage some of those personalities. One of the best moments we ever had was just even a person within our local community came and just shared his testimony, and he was well known. And you do this enough, you tell people, hey, we got a guest that we're going to be interviewing next week. They'll realize, man, we can't miss this, and this is the weekend we need to get our people to as well. And so leverage those moments, and I'm telling you, they don't need to be costly. Every professional athlete that I brought in, all it cost me was lunch. It didn't cost me anything above and beyond that. And so there are people in your community that will help you make those connections, but you want to find and ride that and wave of momentum. And then the last piece is, as you're developing sermon series, you want to pay attention to what are the questions that people are actually asking. Again, we as church leaders, we're really good at answering questions that I don't think people are actually asking. And so maybe take a poll of your people once or twice a year and find out what would be an important conversation, what they're interested in, and then that will help you craft a message series as well that's practical in a way but connects the felt needs of the people within the life of your church. Pastors, leaders, go after it, enjoy the process, and find people that are around you that are even more creative than you. Bring them into that process. Allow them to speak. Allow them to challenge. Find people as well that'll speak truth to you after you communicate, because I know a lot of people will say, Pastor, that was the best message you ever given. And they'll say the same thing week after week after week. Find some people that, will help you land the plane and become a better communicator. Continue to press forward in the sermon development as well. Have fun. This is a great privilege of what it means to be a follower and communicator of God's word to those around us.